Okay, so welcome to the debrief for Module 6, Lesson 3. Earlier, our application problem looked at the number of fish in Sal's pet store. We compared some different tank sizes. We figured out how much less was in one or how much more was in another. What we need to do for our debrief is we need to figure out what is different between a vertical tape diagram and a bar graph, and what is the same about a vertical tape diagram and a bar graph. So what I've done is I've taken this information and I've turned it into a bar graph below. Now, let's start off with what is different. So what's different is on my bar graph, I have a label on the left and I have a label on the bottom. This tells me that these numbers represent the number of fish, and this down here tells me that each of these columns represents a different tank. Here, I don't have that label on the left. I have my numbers put inside of the vertical tape diagrams, but I don't have the label telling me what it is. Now, down here, there's no numbers inside of my bar graph, whereas here there are numbers inside. Now, there's a lot more in common than there is that's different between these two. So let's start talking about what we have in common, or what's the same about these two models. Well, here I've got vertical columns, and here I've got vertical columns. Here I've got tank A representing 15 fish. Here I've got tank A representing 5, 10, 15 fish. Now, instead of putting the numbers inside of this bar graph reaches all the way up to the 15 right here. If it went up to here, it would be representing more than 15. But because the bar graph stops here on the 15 line, we know that it represents 15 fish. Here in tank B, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups of 5. Here, I still have 6 groups of 5, but I don't put the numbers inside. I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and here it stops at 30. I still have a label or a title for each. Here it's number of fish in pet store, and here it's also called number of fish in pet store. The information being represented is the same. Tank E, D, C, B, and A all have the same information represented inside. So both of these models are representing the same information. What I like about the bar graph is it gives a little bit more precise information. Here I know that each of these numbers represents the number of fish, whereas in my vertical tape diagram, I have to assume that because this is called number of fish in the pet store, this is the number of fish in tank A. This actually tells me it's the number of fish in tank A. So both of these are really good models to represent data quickly, because what I can do, and if you look back to our picture graph, a quick glimpse at any of these models tells me that this is the most, this is the most, this is the most. Here, this is the least, this is the least, and this is the least. And I still get a lot of information. The longer I look at each of these models, the more information I can pull from them. And it's funny because if I look at these three models, they all look very, very similar. They just have small differences, but they can still represent the same type of information. Again, what a bar graph does is it takes a tape diagram and simply turns it vertical. All of these are different versions of vertical models to represent information.